for me. It's a new time. It's a new format because I don't have a format. It's a 2-hour show. What I'm going to do, I was planning to launch this particular show, this particular time slot in January, but then I thought I can just do some stuff from now until January and play about a little bit and have a bit of fun. So that's what I've decided to do. So there's no format. It's just a conversation. It's just me messing about with stuff on the radio, for want of a better way to do things. And it's the first show of what we probably would describe as a new season or a new, I don't know, it's a new something. So I've got 3 hours to work with during the week instead of just one now. I was getting frustrated with just 1 hour. And I think 3 might be about right. If I'm still frustrated, then I'll add another hour somewhere else, or I'll extend the Saturday show or something. But I want to see if I can manage for 3 hours first of all. And to celebrate the fact that it's a new conversational, open-ended kind of experimental type of show, I've invited Dr. Lenny Time to join me for a conversation. Are you there, Lenny, or have you disappeared?
I am here.
Awesome.
Am I not here?
Awesome.
Hello, hello?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay. Yes, a brand new show for a new way of doing things. Sounds good.
Yeah, I've got lots of new ways of doing things. It takes me all my time not to jettison everything. That's probably my problem, is I just let go of everything and start again a lot of the time.
Well, in the world today, that's probably the best way to do it because you're not hung on into things that are past tense.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And anything that's good's going to come back, presumably.
It all comes back because it spins around and repeats in a regular cycle. But that's only the DNA level, which is a fractal of the other levels. And we're on human scale. On human scale, things seem to be really messed up, but there's order in the chaos, or is that chaos in the order? And as they push to a more and more ordered structure society, they build the level of chaos that's just going to blow that system out of gear. So it's incumbent on us, the radio talk show hosts and the cognizant people around, to start thinking of different alternative ways of doing things, but not introducing them until they're replacing something that's broken irreparably, because the whole system is breaking, but the order that it breaks is what's going to be the central react to point. So, for instance, if the electricity goes out worldwide, that's one big problem. If somebody starts a nuclear war, it's a totally different problem, but they're all this linked to the same problem in that there's some desperate people trying desperately to hold on, and we live in strange times. But strange and charmed are like chaos and order. They're a pair of concepts that provide a yin yang. And I've been referring to the I Ching lately and thinking, I have 3 copies of the book and I don't have one here with me. So I'll have to remedy that here soon and start throwing coins again to predict the future.
Yeah, I think I've got 2 copies. I've got 2 different translations. I've got a Christianized translation somewhere that may not be here anymore, but I did have one that was very Christian, and I've got the one with the Carl Jung introduction in it, which is the German translation that was then translated into English.
Okay, mine is a yellow book that's about hand-sized. It's smaller than standard, but I've got several copies of it scattered in different book collections because I always tried to pick up one if I didn't have one. But rural America right now is a strange place, and I can get lots of books for a quarter apiece, but I can't choose which books I get. If I want to spend up to $5, though, I can order books through the internet and get just about any book I want as long as it's not a collector's item. So I encourage everybody to be reading as much as they can get their hands on, especially volumes written before modern times, which I consider to be about 1950. Anything post World War II is fanatical. Not that fanatical is bad. Science fiction of the 1950s is totally outrageous compared to what the reality was, but science fiction of the 1950s is here in living color in 2023, right?
Yeah, we're pretty much expressing that. It's all very much an invasion of the body snatchers, tarantula, post nuclear holocaust kind of radiation infused aliens kind of world we're living in at
With
the
a little
moment.
bit of Fahrenheit 451 tossed in for fun,
Yeah,
and
that's
then wrapped up in a package narrated by Rod Serling.
that's the book reference, definitely. I get my books. Um, I was reading a lot of crime fiction. So
Okay.
I've been reading a lot of Ian Rankin and Linda LaPlante, and that was more or less it. There's a couple of others that I jump in and out of. I've got a Peter Sellers biography that I started reading. Colin Dexter as well. British.
Peter Sellers is one of my favorite actors. His portrayal of the Duke of Grand Fenwick was marvelous.
Yeah, was that the Mouse that Roared?
Yep. And you know, if you look at it, it's the same shakedown that Zelensky is using into Ukraine, is the one that Peter Sellers used in that movie.
Oh, it's an archetype, isn't it? So it's the little guy defending the country against aggressive evil empire or whatever.
Well,
So
yeah,
it's definitely
if you declare war against the evil empire and then make peace, they shower you with dollars. Well, he missed the make peace part, but you know, it ain't over till it's over. And the only thing I can say is that tomorrow's headline is going to be more bizarre than yesterday's headline.
that's definitely true. I think we're running out of headlines slowly but surely. So there'll be a bizarre combination of World War II fighters found on the moon, World War II bombers found on
Yeah,
the moon,
yeah,
and whatever the new thing is.
yeah. They'll be talking to the Atlanteans who left Earth in a spaceship because it wasn't inhabitable, and the dolphins left with them, and they said, "So long, thanks for all the fish."
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing well. We've managed to get Peter Sellers and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in, and we're only 10 minutes into the show.
Hmm. I remember the first time I was introduced to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it was not in the book form. It was in the BBC television series, and they
Yeah, yeah.
had characters playing Arthur Dent and Ford Prefect and such. And it started right as the book started with Arthur laying in front of a bulldozer, trying to convince them not to knock down his house, even though the earth is going to explode for a hypersonic bypass.
Yeah, it was
It
Hitchhiker's
is.
Guide that
It's total reality. What was that?
yeah, it was Hitchhiker's Guide that cemented my relationship with radio because it was originally a radio show. It was
Okay.
almost exactly the same as the TV version. I don't think they changed anything in the script at all, but it was a 6-part radio um, adaptation. and I discovered Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on Radio 4. They used to run it at. They must have been running it at 10 o'clock, and then the big news show in the evening was 10:30 in the evening at the time, and I got hooked. I got hooked on Hitchhiker's Guide, and then I started getting hooked on the news show as well. So then Radio 4 turned into my go-to place for culture. That was when I was about 14, 13, 14, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, at that point, my culture was jet setting around the world. I actually visited Moscow and Leningrad when I was a teenager
Right?
in the
That's good going,
1970s.
man.
Yeah, now I won't get on an airplane, but back then, who cared? And the United States and Russia had just declared détente, and our high school had a visitor come in who was a principal at one of the Russian high schools, and he and the principal at my high school struck it off. So he invited the principal to gather up some students and come to Russia. So I got to be in the Hotel Russia, which is right on Red Square, and spend a couple days in Moscow. Then we went to St. Petersburg, which was called Leningrad, and went to the largest bookstore in the world at that time, a place called Dom Kniga, and got two periodic tables in Russian that I gave to my high school teacher and the principal who took me out there. So it was kind of entertaining. And I was a world traveler. And I sometimes wonder now if that world travel put me on the radar screen of all the nasty three-letter agencies so that I get bothered more than other people. It's one of those mind games that they play with you where once you're on their radar screen, every so often they have to goose you to tickle what's up. And I think the FBI works really hard to goose a lot of people who are not quite firm of mind, and that we get big red flags when they get goosed.
Right. Yeah, you used to be able to take Levi's jeans and swap them for currency in Moscow at that particular point, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yep. Levi's jeans, Bic pens, and lighters. And they liked American chocolate. I ended up trading and then had a nice fur rabbit hat that I got there and a number of other things. But if I had been smart, I could have bought gold rings and stuff and brought them back and just held them. Of course, who knew that gold would now be $2,000 an ounce? Sort of inflated price, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, at one point, I had a friend who married a Ukrainian woman, and her brother used to send stuff through from Ukraine, and she would sell it on in London. So I had a, a Ukrainian like military coat, absolutely huge, and it was so warm that you couldn't wear it even in the winter. so it became, so it was a waste of time me buying it, but at the time it seemed like a good idea. So you could wear it for half an hour, but then it was so hot you couldn't walk. So I had to just go home and take the coat off.
Hey, wait, isn't that called a personal sauna?
It's It was a strange one. They got married in the end. They got married on in Stoke Newington in North London, and I remember I didn't go to the wedding, but I went to the reception,
Mm-hmm.
and the bride's mother had been doing all the food, so it was all pickles and borscht and all this Ukrainian kind of stuff that I couldn't eat really. So I ended up sneaking out again and just go to see the movie Titanic with one of my mates. Well, that was the same day as the wedding reception. It must have been. It wasn't a Saturday. It must have been a Thursday or something.
Huh. That's a novel concept, going out to a movie in a theater. Doesn't happen too often anymore nowadays with the idiot box intact and everybody addicted to their device. I guess now you can make your phone change the channel on your television set.
Say that
And I
again,
have,
Lenny. I missed part of it.
can you take your phone now and use it as a channel changer on your television set? It's one of the few
Oh yeah, I
things I
think I remote.
strange. The use of technology has gotten strange. I think a lot of the technology that we're using now is built to fail because they want to sell more of the technology, but also because they interrupted the education process to insert falsity and get it embedded in what we know so that our sciences aren't quite right compared to the sciences of 80 to 120 years ago. So we can't duplicate the things that were made back then because things like electricity and magnetism just aren't in our current understanding. And a lot of what we take for science was made up by those fiction writers of the 1950s. And we have things that just aren't true that are embedded in our belief system that we have to figure out a different way of getting at. I mean, a lot of the old philosophers were correct in what they say, but who knows if we got what they actually said or a translation that's been rewritten 6 or 10 times to say whatever the leaders of the current time want us to say. That's Sparky saying hello. He feels the need to talk to you.
Hello, Sparky. Yeah, it's a lot of things get lost in translation. I think from philosophy at least, it's going from Greek to German to French to English a lot of the time. So it gets lost the first time round and corrected, and then it gets corrected again by somebody else who doesn't know what they're talking about, and then it gets corrected again by somebody else who doesn't know what they're talking about. So you've got to be very, very careful about translations.
Yeah, there was a time in my life when I could translate from German to English and back and forth, but it was only in a scientific framework. But it allowed me to read literature written in German, and boy, does German have a different system than modern English. You got to find the verb in the back of the sentence and other things that make it much easier when you understand that the dialect isn't framed the same way.
Yeah, I mean it gives them a way of talking. I mean, I'm only really I've never read anything in German in terms of philosophy, but I've read some of the translations, and it's clunky when it comes into English, but it probably made total sense in German.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of the English translators understood what the words said, but it wasn't really quite the meaning that was portrayed by the Germans in using those words. And, well, English has some words that can be used in half a dozen different ways. And if you're not up on it, you miss the slang. And all of a sudden, people are upset because you're saying something that you shouldn't have said in public. But that's okay. They twist everybody's words and tell you exactly what they want to tell you. I've been associated with events where I saw the event and read the report in the newspaper afterwards, and it wasn't even 50% correct But that's what people go on believing. And so I really think we have to give up our belief systems and rebuild them from scratch. And that means going back to Descartes. I think, therefore I am, and questioning whether thinking is what actually makes us be.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to know how far back to go, and what to keep and what to let go of. As I said, I've got a tendency to let go of pretty much everything, but it's not always the best way to go. Sometimes you want to hold on to, I don't know. Sometimes it makes sense to hold on to things that look odd or sound odd or feel odd, but they just make sense to hold on to.
Yeah, you want to be careful that before you just reject something outright, that you have something that can at least replace the essence of what it is. And if it's not broke, trying to fix something not broke just causes more problems by breaking other things that are dependent on it. But we've got some serious human problems to deal with, starting with our economic systems that have been in place, so they tell us, forever. But really, when you look at it, rolled in after World War II because of the discrepancy of wealth in the bombed out world versus the United States that didn't see any action. And so the economic changes that were created then lead me to believe that the winners of World War II were not the United States, and maybe not even the Germans, but the Russians, who right now look much the best in the world, but really didn't look that way in what, 1988 or so?
No, but they've managed to, well, for whatever reasons, for reasons of dictatorship and genocide, amongst other reasons, they've managed to hold on to their natural resources. So the place that's got the most resources at the moment, I think, is Russia, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Ukraine was a valuable resource for growing food and being in a defensive position to keep Germans from marching into Russia. But, you know, sort of things got out of control with this NATO organization, which has one too many letters for most people. But it's another one of those three-letter organizations like NASA. Never a straight answer. Or is that not a space agency?
Yeah, it's just the expansionism is the problem. The fact that NATO thinks that everybody wants to be part of NATO is the problem.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because the underlying system behind everything is total bankruptcy, and they're inventing money, snap of the finger, to spend on whatever they want to buy and buying all the resources. It's about time that nations canceled their debt. But, nations are a pretty screwy concept also. We could go back to city states or even scrap the idea of states and cities and just go to local governance. And, feudalism might not have been as bad as Monty Python suggested it was. And
Yeah, we used to manage quite well with parish councils and things like that. I mean, the village I grew up in was it's 11th century, so it's an Anglo-Saxon village ultimately with a Christian church in the middle of it.
that's interesting. Yeah, everybody comes from different cultural environments, and all those environments are in the past. They no longer exist. You couldn't go back to the way you grew up and grow up that way again in this day and age. But to me, it seems like we've been hijacked by the television set, and that by having that much access to information all the time, we got information overload on things that don't matter, and the things that do matter have been buried out of sight for a long time, but will make themselves apparent as soon as we pull the plug on what's going on now. But reality is a strange notion. And what is real for me doesn't have to be real for you, but we have a common interest in revolution radio and seeing that the ideas get out there no matter who's espousing them. And meanwhile, there's a whole bunch of people running around woke who says everybody who's not thinking like them is a racist. And meanwhile, they throw around terms like racist as though it was a pejorative that was going to hurt somebody physically, when all it is a way of mind controlling people into not saying what's on their mind. It's like when the emperor who had no clothes ran into the boy who saw right through it but didn't know the social mores. It makes for quite an interesting conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. We're still kind of working through some of that stuff. It's all it obviously goes in waves and it'll bounce back the other way at some point. But it's I think we're in it somewhere at the moment on whatever cycles we're going through. So we've got a lot of pushback, but not enough to stop it from happening.
Well, is it really happening, or are they just telling us it's happening, and then by our reaction to it, it makes it real? I haven't been watching the news lately, and so I'm lost in the center of what's going on. But I'm at the point where it's difficult to try and follow anything through the nonsense presented by the lamestream media, or the knee jerk reaction to that nonsense, which throws the same nonsense back with different spin.
Yeah, it's definitely call and response. I think we've spoken about it before, but the alternative media just responds to the mainstream, which means it's covering the same topics, and we never get stretched. That's one of the things I want to do with this show is stretch a little bit, because I was feeling frustrated with the format that I had on a Saturday. So yeah, that's one of the things I want to do. I don't know
Well,
how to do it, but I'll work it out.
what would it look like if we went to total world anarchy for a while? Do you think people would form their own forms of governance? Or do you think they just allow each other to be who they are and figure out a way to exchange? And really,
I think
what we
it would, in terms of exchanging food and what have you, it would happen quite quickly. We'd just work it out. But then on a larger scale, I think it would take a bit longer.
well, a lot of it would be the availability of product. You'd have to make things locally, and some places they're used to making things. Others, what they make is information which isn't necessarily accurate and isn't going to be supported by a non technical society. And the fact is, most of the people using the technological effects couldn't reproduce those effects if they stopped working. You can't build your own television. Used to be I could build a radio. Now I don't know that I can. Uh, Remember when they had kits for crystal radios that we had to build?
I've seen the kits, but I've never built one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't tackle a TV.
No, can you imagine a computer? Although I've seen now where they show computer chips and they look a lot like inner cities. Kind of funny. It's a whole thing of scale.
Yeah, I think they do. There's a way of building computers from components that all slot together, but you've got to know where to go for the components.
Yes. And you gotta get them in the right order and the right orientation. And one capacitor backwards can fry your whole system.
Yeah,
But
so it's too complicated for me. I would let you do that particular type of stuff.
well, you see, most people would find it too complicated. And we're in a world where it might never be able to be recreated because what was created was done well in the past and duplicated, but not actually done by the people holding the patents.
Right, so you've only got part knowledge passing down all the time. Part of it gets missed out.
Yeah, and when you have scientists going back and changing the work of other scientists, like Heaviside and Dirac in the 1920s and 30s, rewriting Maxwell's equations, you let the powers that be change the reality, and then years down the road, you can't get there from here. And I think we need to take some of our central premises, like we are organic creatures, and rethink that because we've got more water than organic in us. We are aqueous creatures, and the organic provides the scaffolding and isn't terribly important to the mechanism of thought and conversation, or what we call consciousness.
Yeah, it's a bizarre combination of random acts of complete randomness. So I don't know how we actually managed to get here in this particular. Uh,
Well, are
it's,
we
it's a,
all here even? Who's to say that this isn't a level of consciousness that's part of a larger avatar that's running dozens of different players in dozens of different simulations?
well, I think that's possible. I think that's possible. Ultimately, it all comes down to the consciousness level, and you can do all sorts of things in consciousness that look like they're separate, but they're actually linking together.
Well, it might be the convergence of time where in a normal type of situation, you make a decision A or B, and timeline A takes you one way, and timeline B takes you another way, and the decision really didn't matter, so they converge again at some point in the future and become a single timeline. But when you make an irrevocable decision to change something, then that didn't happen on the timeline where you didn't make the decision. Those divergent timelines can never get back together. So if you can actually travel time and go back into your past, the future that you grew up in is no longer an option because you've changed something in the past just by physically being there that doesn't allow you back into the real future that you came from. But if there's enough people doing time travel, going back into the past and changing the way things are, then who's to say that the dominant timeline can't shift and a whole bunch of people get pushed together on worlds that didn't exactly happen the same way? So that what happens in the world today is not something of the world that we grew up in, but a hybrid of that world and others that have been pushed into us that are different but similar. And so we get effects like the Mandela effect, which I don't know. Apparently, E.T. never said E.T. go call home in the movie because the AI computers have now changed all the copies of the movies so that E.T. never said it. But we know that E.T. call home was the whole central change point when the humans finally got it in the movie E.T. But Forrest says life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And Forrest had to be the world's least intelligent, most intelligent person.
Yeah, and I never quite got the Mandela effect thing. So it's I recognise that other people have have seen these things and heard these things, but it never seemed to get its way to me.
Well, there's some things that I just can't explain, like Isaiah 11:8 through 13, where the story of the lion lying down with the lamb has changed to the wolf lying down with the lamb. And if you go back and pull a Bible off the shelf of a place where it's been for enough years to collect dust, you can go look up the reference. And it indeed does say the wolf and the lamb lie down. But how much art has a lion lying down with a lamb? And I happen to be a biblical scholar at one time in my life, and I sort of remember things, even though reality tells me I remember them wrong. So I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
the
I was
Mandela effect is a merging of timelines that were sort of forced together.
right, right.
Yeah, I can agree with Willow there that the Mandela effect is remembering things differently. The only thing is, there seems to be some authority that says truth or not truth, and things I remember aren't true anymore. But maybe we work outside of time. Maybe if you wave your hands and say the right incantations, you can make time go backwards for a little while and have a second chance at correcting an error that you made the first time. Or maybe we go through the same thing over and over, like in a dream every night, and the reality that we see here is our dream, and where we go at night is our real reality.
Oh, you can definitely do the error correction thing. I've been doing that for years, but there's loads of different techniques you can use for that. Uh, Emotional freedom technique is an obvious one. Sedona method, um, loads of things. There's loads of ways to do it because it's just unprogramming yourself. It's unraveling things you think you know that actually aren't true. That's the key to the whole thing.
Well, the Beatles had it right that nothing is real, so there's nothing to get hung about.
Yeah, pretty much. I make the assumption that with these shows that imagination creates reality to begin with. So then it's
Once
just a
we
matter
set,
of how do you use your imagination.
yeah, but once you set a stream of reality, then you have cause and effect taking place. And if you set something up, knock over that first domino and the rest of them will fall too, won't they?
Yeah, they fall for a while and then they kind of slow down a bit, and you can maybe divert onto another timeline, or you change the energy of it, or you go backwards and flip a domino over in a different direction.
I think a majority of people have left this timeline and they're replaced by NPCs, non-player characters that are not really thinking within this timeline at all, but are stuck in a previous timeline at the point where they left the reality and they actually got what they wanted, and that maybe only 10% of the people currently playing out within this reality are here in their full consciousness. Other people on other timelines, similar narratives, have already elected Hillary or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, I mean, I play around with timelines a little bit. I've not done too much work with it, but because it takes me all my time to just focus on one. But I have met people who were living like a dream life. So I knew one guy who was living his normal life, and then he had a parallel life in his dream life.
Oh, that's interesting. Same wife or different wife?
Oh, the details of it escape me now, but he did tell me he like huge imagination. This guy was working in TV, uh, putting together music shows mainly. So I had a conversation with him. I discovered a band called, what was it, Two Cellos. There's a cello, like just a it's two guys with cellos, basically two Italian guys with cellos doing cover versions of rock tunes. And I showed him I showed him the clip of them doing it live, doing a version of Thunderstruck by AC/DC. And
Mhm.
the next day, he'd come up with a video of a plane crash over Los Angeles with two guys playing Thunderstruck in the back of the plane as it goes down. And he had a lot of good creative stuff going on. But that's one of the things that was happening with him is he was going in and out of dreams that were continuous, so they were ongoing kind of dream timelines. So I'm wondering how many people actually do that. Nobody. When I did ask somebody at one point when I was in a philosophy meeting and then we were talking about something and it ended up being about lucid dreaming. This conversation, and I asked a question about lucid dreaming, and nobody else even knew what I was talking about in this philosophy meeting. So, and there was 35 people. Always precognition, precognitive
Mhm.
dream I was talking about, which I've had quite a lot of. I've had quite a lot of kind of flashes of what's happening over the next 3 or 4 days, or uh, inspirations that then lead me in a particular direction or whatever that are not quite precognitive, but they're setting up the next few days from the dream. But when I asked the question about precognitive dreams in this philosophy group with 30 people in the room, one guy was prepared to put his hand up and say he had a precognitive dream out of 30.
Hmm. Interesting. The person I know who does lucid dream work at the top level is a gentleman named Ed Kellogg. And for a while, he and I were in the same philosophy group. We called it the Hedronists because we all had something to do with geometry or sacred geometry. And
Right.
what lucid dreaming can do in an individual, if you remember and write down your dreams and can get back into them, is create a whole parallel reality of existence. And so I think that maybe we can step out of time and have things that take place in our reality, but then return us back to the same second of time where we stepped out and have that reality that we experienced not be in the time that we're in the process of being on. I also wonder about the scale of time, and if time, does 80 years take a millisecond, or does 80 years take 80 centuries? Or how would we know if we always normalize humanity to 80 years?
Yeah, I mean it's the blink of an eye to a galaxy. It's literally the blink of an eye, except that obviously galaxies don't have eyes necessarily. They might have some.
Well, you never know. Maybe galaxies see themselves as humans in human form, and we're just humans somewhere in a blood cell and a galaxy sized human.
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible. Certainly, it's on kind of where are we on kind of bacteria scale. The human body would be a galaxy, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And if water scale, bacteria scale, human scale, planetary scale, solar scale, and galactic scale, we're all fractals of each other running the basic same narrative. But as you got larger and larger, it took that much more time. Then the pyramids could have been created as a toy on a galactic scale and left in a playpen by a child who grew up and ignored the toy.
Yeah, and at some point he might come back and collect these toys from the toy box.
Maybe that's what the reality is now, is the aliens are coming back to take their toys back.
Yeah, that's possible as well. That's very much possible. I don't rule out anything at this point.
I wonder if I can. I wonder if we can rule out anything we can conceive of, because the future is going to be inconceivable to us from this perspective.
Yeah, it's it's difficult because it's I get so tempted to get sucked into the end of the world every time I go online. I end up being sucked into some kind of mass extinction event, and I don't really want to go there. But it's
No,
just
we're not going there. We've already passed that point in time. But the question is, maybe Project Looking Glass couldn't see past the veil, because once we got past the veil, we set up the veil itself so that they couldn't mess with it from this side of the veil. And maybe as we get closer to the event, which has already taken place on many of the time scales, it just hasn't happened on the galactic scale, that we are humans inside a cell, inside a cell. And I wonder if maybe human scale begins at water, and water, with its 3 degrees of freedom, carries memory, and the whole structure is the universal common thoughts of water molecules to make up, I don't know, we say oceans, but I think on planetary scale we understand water. What is water on galactic scale? Is it clouds in the ether? I don't know. I think being able to say, I don't know, really frustrates the powers that be, because they want us to think that they know everything. And hence we should know everything because they think they do.
um, I'm tending to know less as I get older. So I'm less worried about knowing nothing. By the time I get to knowing nothing, I'll be dead and buried. But I certainly know less than I did 10 years ago.
Well, I don't think you have a chance at getting buried and knowing nothing, because I don't think your consciousness ever passes out of existence. Only your physical mortal soul in this reality. But it can't be that that's the end of your life entirely, because then the whole thing would be futile.
Yeah, we've all got something to contribute, I think. So it's all you don't really need to do anything. I don't know whether you actually have to do anything to make whatever contribution you do, and you just have to be yourself, I think, as much as anything. That's the
Well, it's
key
a
to the.
default thing. If you don't do anything, you are yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Just
So you
being,
can't
just
not do anything. I mean, sometimes I change what I want to do. And I think since Fibonacci has two ones, I look at me as one singular, just Lenny, and the other me as same as everyone in this collective we call human existence that they tell us is 8 billion strong. But I really don't see that many souls here on Earth. I see the capacity for many more if we started looking at all the space that we don't use, but we don't use that space because it's not terribly useful space. But there are things that people have discovered in recent times that lead me to question a whole lot of things, like a portal between Egypt and Colorado, which, if there's a portal where you can, from Colorado, go into Egypt, be at the pyramids, deal with stuff there, and then step back through the portal and be back in Colorado, what does that say about time? And is the time you're in Egypt the same time in the Colorado reality? I I have people who I know who stepped through the portal. I haven't seen them since they went.
right. Okay. I used to know a guy in Michigan. I don't know where he was in Michigan. I think he was living in a caravan or something. He was a Vietnam vet, but he used to do astral healing sessions, and I've had a healing session from him where I felt him in the room with me. So I know that's possible. So yeah, the portal can just be can be a way of astral traveling, but you say people have disappeared.
I didn't say that. I said I haven't seen them since.
Right.
It doesn't, they live 1,000 miles from where I live. The idea that I would see them or talk to them through Discord or something like that, you would think over the years there'd be a pretty good chance that you talk to most of the people you know. But in actuality, you change about 50% of the people you know through the years. That's one of the made up statistics we talked about in the chat room.
Got a
See
couple
you
of
after the break.
minutes, so I'll see you after the break.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Ladies and gentlemen, your lives are becoming more difficult as the life force of your world is draining away. Have you noticed that as everything around you seems to decline, one thing still grows? It is the power of your rulers. None of their plans and directives have solved your problems or made your life better. The only result has been their increased control over you at the cost of your freedom. Do you know why? You gave them the power. They called for your sacrifice, and you thought it was noble. They said if you worked for yourself and your family, that you were selfish and uncaring, and they made you feel ashamed. They denounced the leaders of industry as greedy exploiters. You agreed. All evil needs to win is the consent of good people. To everyone within the range of my voice, you now have a choice to make. If you decide to support the notion of sacrifice enforced by the state, your game is up. Your world is in a downward spiral, and you will ride it down to destruction. But if you share the values, if you believe that your life is a sacred possession for you to make the most of, if you want to live by the judgment of your own mind, not edicts from the state, then follow our lead. Do not support your own oppressors. Stop letting the system exploit you. Form your own communities on the frontiers of your crumbling world. Your rulers hold you by your endurance to carry the burdens they impose, by your generosity when you hear cries of despair, and above all, by your innocence which cannot grasp the depths of their evil. The world you are living in is the world they wanted. Leave them to it. Those who are eager to build a better world, a world of freedom and opportunity, a world based on mutual respect. In that world, you will not receive alms, nor pity, nor forgiveness of sins, but honor, respect, and justice. Don't let the fire go out spark by irreplaceable spark in confusion and despair. The world you desire can be won. It exists. It is real. It is possible. It is yours.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. It's your world. Take it. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at buyer risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, the host sounds like it probably is me, and my name's Dennis, and this is a show called Free Association. It's a new version, a 2-hour version on a Wednesday to go along with the Saturday 1-hour version, and I've got Lenny Time with me.
And I'm in the role of guest. So my opinions are solely my own, even as Hawk reminds us in a very, very old form of Revolution Radio advertising. It's interesting when we hear those promos. It really brings back olden days. But the guest and the host here in free association are going off in tangents about what conscious reality might or might not be. And if it includes time travel, the question is time reversible?
Time reversible. Now, going backwards is an interesting thing. I don't know that time's even real to begin with. So you can probably do anything you like with it.
Well, in Doctor Who, the character River Song was aging backwards in time, so that when she first met the Doctor, she knew everything about him. But as their relationship drew onward in time, she forgot most everything that she had initially talked to him about because she was traveling the other direction.
Yeah, it makes life complicated.
I think time is scalable and that it is different for each of us, that we've normalized time into seconds, minutes, hours, days to have it so that we can communicate, but nothing says that your minute and my minute have to actually be the same length of minute. And we sort of lock it in through our conversation here that our time is the same. But if we're coming from different scales, that could be normalized too. So trying to figure out what scale human existence is actually on, it's rather interesting to think about. I think the Mayan calendar, with their 13 scales that range from magnetic being 1 to cosmic being 13, might actually be a number of different narratives that are potential from each human existence.
Yeah, it's definitely gives you a range of ways of looking at the same problem or the same situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, because when somebody does something different, I think that's when nature takes it upon itself to start up once again on from the point in time where it broke and return to that time on a different scale and try many different solutions to provide the novelty of working itself through a new situation, because nature's been there, done that way more than we humans have, because we count linearly and she counts Fibonacci. Is that a word?
It is now.
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci, yeah. It should be a word if it isn't.
Well, nobody said we weren't allowed to coin new words on the radio. So it's our new word of the day. That could put a lot of pressure on other days.
No, I'm not putting pressure on anything in this show. It's all just if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I believe
I'm not going to.
I believe in Flippy, and every day is Catter Day.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. The more you can just chill out and let it flow, the better, as far as radio is concerned. Anyway.
Well, cats have an interesting way of chilling out anywhere. They can just become a puddle of nothing. But I've got one that can be talkative here, who's laying down, and when I scratch his butt, he starts responding. So cats are essential to the world at some point, but not everybody is a cat person. And I think everybody is a dog person, at least from the dog perspective, and that dogs, when they see themselves in relation to humans, think, wow, that guy feeds me and takes me for walks and entertains me a lot. He must be God. Whereas the cat's opinion of the thing is, well, that guy feeds me, takes me for an occasional walk, and is always here. I must be God.
Yeah,
And
that's definitely the difference.
yeah. And so once you get beyond the effects of how you're supposed to deal with pets, you find not only are they intelligent, but maybe more intelligent in some ways than we are. It's just these opposable thumbs are so useful for getting things done.
Yeah, I find if I talk to dogs as if they're people, they respond as if they're people. So I've got there's a guy I know with a Jack Russell, and his person died a couple of years ago, so he was kind of passed on to my mate, and he's got a lot of separation anxiety. He's literally, you can see him like he's checking out the room to make sure that everybody's in the place that he expects them to be all the time. And I started just talking to him as if he was a human being with anxiety. And slowly over 5 or 6 months, the conversation kind of gave him the option of letting go of his separation anxiety. So he's a lot more chilled out now than he was.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that animals completely, at least dogs and cats, understand English and the nuance of tone. And it doesn't matter what you say to them, they pick up the tone in which you say it, and that they can read their human very well, and they play us for what they want. And to actually have a conversation is a good thing that most people don't give them the wit, but they have the wit. I've learned how to talk to trees also. Shout out to Lizzie, who's another talk show host here, who Mountain Times with Lizzie, she put out a video on talking to trees. So we like talking to all sorts of things in nature, but you have to figure out the vibration and get to it. And humans don't change their vibration outside of human scale very well. But if you want to talk to a tree, you just have to slow your metabolism down so that the tree recognizes that there's another substance there. And so that could give us some real clue as to how time works, in that it's not linear at all, but it's extremely size dependent. So that if you are very, very small, short periods of time can seem much, much longer. But there's an easy way to buy more time anytime you need it, and that's to get into Dr. Seuss's waiting place. Because if you're waiting for something to happen, time takes forever.
Yeah, or if you're waiting for something important to happen, then you're going to notice every single second, simply because you're putting attention on it, you're putting importance on it, or giving it meaning or whatever. It's the meaning thing.
Yeah, I've also learned, though, that if you have an impossible deadline to make, if you start working towards making that deadline, no matter how impossible it seemed, you get done in time to meet the deadline. But if you never start, you miss the deadline right off. And so life is funny that way, and it doesn't work like how they've taught us it works, which is why we have to shed our preconceptions and look at things in totally different perspectives from time to time. And none of us has the capacity to really have a 360-degree view. It's you can turn your neck to see maybe 245 on either side, but even then, when you try and turn your neck that far, you're built to strain something.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bizarre combination of techniques, but you can use kind of a Neville Goddard imagination creates reality technique, which is feeling the way you want things to be, and assuming that they've already happened. That's essentially his technique. Although he rationalizes it and justifies it with verses from the Bible, but that's ultimately what it comes down to, is just feeling things that have happening the way that you want them to happen.
That could be self-deceptive, couldn't it?
It could be, but I've tested it. Not that I've tested some of his techniques, and they do work. They do, certainly in terms of finding places to live. I've done that a couple of times where I've just felt myself in this particular flat where I'm living now, the exact location. I was visualizing a healing center in the center of Newcastle. What I didn't realize was I was going to end up living in the place where I was visualizing the healing center.
That is interesting. But I've sort of allowed somebody else to visualize the healing center and just attached to become part of it. And I am learning way more now than I have in years about various techniques of physical healing. And the most important is to eat well. And if you control your diet to get your nutrition, then you don't need most of what they're passing off as food and drugs these days.
Yeah, as long as you get the right combination in the right proportions. It's the proportions are important as well.
Yeah, and it's important to grow your own weed so you knew where it came from.
Yeah, that's if weed's your thing, then it's the same with everything really. If you the more you know about where things are coming from, the better.
Yeah, and if you think the best of things, you tend off leading a happier life than if you think the worst of things. So, given a choice, choose the better choice. And to everybody, that word, which is the better choice, is different. So, maybe the better choice for you is not the better choice for me. But sometimes I'll make a decision and then 30 seconds to 5 minutes past the decision, I'll know I made the wrong decision. And that's when correcting it and moving into a sphere where you always make the right decisions makes a lot of sense. And if you get to a mindset that you can do that, it changes your reality quite a bit. But we're in a reality that is just a put up. And I don't know how it's done, but it's not on the level. So, what we take for our beliefs that we hold to be true and self evident don't necessarily have to be so. And so, questioning everything that we know and studying it and getting to the point where our knowledge is firsthand and then discussing it with other people with firsthand knowledge to agree on the language that we can use to go further, I think is going to need to be done to rebuild society from scratch in a way that anybody who wants to have say can have say, and that groups of people should never be able to run over the rights of an individual, but we need a mechanism for considering perspective And what we have in the rule of law is so sickeningly badly broken that I don't think we can ever trust courts and juries and judges and things like that ever again. We have to come up with a system where, I don't know, like the old days, although I'm not ready to burn witches at the stake, we have to have some way of letting people know that this person is not capable of making judgment for themselves. Beware. But now it seems we encourage bad behavior by rewarding it and punishing good behavior. So I just don't understand and therefore withdraw my consent.
Yeah, I've pretty much withdrawn my consent for everything. So I'm not. I mean, I've had conversations locally at Stand in the Park on a Sunday morning with people who are they're kind of anarchist tendencies. So they're very much like local groups and um, trying to work out new systems of things. I mean, it's a conversation level. It's not actually happening at any point, but they're still working through the conversations. But I always end up in a place where I'm defending the underdog. So I'm not sure that even a common law system would work, like a small scale common law court system or something like that, because people have so many built-in biases that it just like the biases that are already there take over and you don't actually get to assess the evidence.
Yes, and the way that the evidence is presented is biased in the first place. And so it I don't know. I think that to educate ourselves, we need to put ourselves into the role of the decision makers and look at what they're facing to make decisions, to understand how those decisions come about. But just understanding has taken on different meaning, because if you say you understand in the court, that means you accept their jurisdiction. And I think we're all sovereign because they've abdicated their responsibility.
Yeah,
It's
we're all sovereign. We have to start from the assumption that we are all sovereign individuals, that we're starting from the point where everybody has the right to make their own version, if you like, and then you find the group that fits with your version, but you can't impose it on anybody else.
yeah. And there should be enough alternatives for anyone that doesn't want to be imposed upon to choose a different way rather than imposing their values on people who obviously don't agree. But it doesn't mean that we should not agree, because there's a lot of places where the disagreement is a matter of perspective and we do better by forming a valid agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a group that I go to on the third Wednesday of the month, which coincidentally it meets about 30 seconds away from where I live. So I'll still be able to do the radio show for the majority of the time, but I might skip the last 10 minutes or so on that particular Wednesday. But there are libertarian groups, or there's like a local group of people who are claiming to be libertarians, but then when it actually comes down to it, they've all got very strong opinions that they want to impose on the other people in the group. So it becomes less of a libertarian group and more of a continuous argument.
I felt the libertarians in the United States lost their identity when they circled around Ron Paul and he continued to be a Republican, and the Libertarians got drafted into the Republican Party in order to support Dr. Paul, and there aren't very many libertarians out there any longer. I don't know. I think that all political debate is kind of useless anymore because the sides have cemented their ideas into their approach that is distinctly converse from my reality. And I don't buy any of it and question the jurisdiction. As sovereign individuals, we should be asked to at least give proxy to our sovereignty to somebody who can negotiate in our behalf. But I look at the world today, and just like the computers, where if you check a box, that is an act of giving them, the computer companies, total control to upgrade your system and put your storage in the clouds and all sorts of things that you didn't ask them to do, but they now want to charge you money for doing after they imposed it upon you for no cost and then decided to change the rules after they had everybody hooked on the stuff. But it's like Microsoft hijacked my computer for 2 hours the other day to upgrade their programming, and I'm not going to Microsoft 11. I'm going to stay in 10 until they shut 10 down and hopefully move to a system better than 11. But you know, the whole compulsory thing where businesses have advantage over the people has to end. Where I come from, that was known as fascism when the businesses and the government colluded against the people. And I think that's kind of what we have now within the whole Western world governance. Step back and let's see how the Eastern world does it for a little while we regroup. Because the debt, who's the debt owed to anyway? All these countries are in debt. In debt to whom? If they're sovereign countries, there shouldn't be allowed to be debtors. And it's not to each other because China's just as broke as we are. But they say that our debt is to China. I don't buy it. Who's the debt really to? And if it's to the bankers, chuck the whole system. That's usury. In fact, we need to chuck the whole system anyway. If we continue to base life on economics, we're in real trouble. If we continue to base voting on geographics, we're in real trouble. And oh, by the way, look out there. We're in real trouble. So there's a lot to do to fix the system that relies on coming up with alternate systems so that when the service provided by the system breaks down, we have another way of doing things. And trade is the first area we'd work in because everybody makes something of value and needs to get something back of value. Although I don't know that that works in the world anymore. There's a lot of people who provide limited to no value who get paid rather well ahead of people who provide full value. And that just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, the whole system's a bit of a bait and switch with Microsoft because it started out as, I started years and years ago in the mid 80s when it was MS DOS, and it was just a copy of a previous operating system. They bought the operating system off somebody, and then licensed it or whatever, and changed the name, and then built on top of it. But it was all self-contained, and then suddenly it becomes not self-contained anymore.
Yeah,
So
I
that's,
know. When back in that day, I was writing programming in Unix, and Unix is not MS DOS. It's a totally different language system, and it's not C++, which was really where the internet got developed under. Although you can use any operating system as long as it interfaces with the common. But the profit motive really mucked things up, and the fact that Bill Gates has his fingers all over Microsoft just sickens me. But the fact that they hijacked my machine for times to load up their self-serving software pisses me off. I think that maybe we need to decorporate all the corporations. Certainly, we need to make corporations specifically not persons, and we need to hold corporate people responsible for the decisions that their corporation makes. But what does holding people responsible really mean?
Yeah, if you're talking about holding individuals responsible at board level or at a senior management level, that has to apply to everybody really. So it applies. It would have to apply in hospitals. It would have to be personal responsibility all the way down the chain.
Yeah, and we don't have that. We have at some point the legal system choosing favorites and stepping in and giving some people abdication of responsibility while holding other people to higher standards.
Yeah, the people on the lower level take all the flack, and everybody else gets promoted beyond their capacity. So you end up with the people running the show who know the least and aren't capable of doing the job they're doing.
Well, that was in the 1960s, the Peter Principle, where people rise to the level of their incapacity to do the work. And if you could ship them back to the previous position they had where they worked well, it would be fine. But instead, they're put in a place where they are under constant stress and can't do the job. Wait, did I just define government?
I think you might have done. You might have just you might have just defined every corporation on the planet as well, because corporations run just in exactly the same way. You get promoted to get you out of the system. You just created the mess in, basically.
Yeah, and you get to continue creating your mess until you retire or die off, and then somebody else inherits it.
Yeah, that's the way it tends to work in the UK at least. So the people who stick around, the people who are company men, are the people who will get promoted beyond their capacity, and the people who see the mess aren't going to stay around anyway. So you don't need to worry about them. You just look after the company men.
Yeah. It works very well to make company men, doesn't it? Oh well. So what else have we got to talk about on this fine Wednesday?
Well, we can take it to, where could we take it to? Artificial intelligence or something like that. That's always a topical thing to have a chat about.
Yeah, I'm not sure I trust the artificial intelligence not to be just programmed intelligence. And at some point, we have a problem with the word intelligence anyway, because we've got intelligence agencies that show very little intelligence.
Yeah, again, another way that the system just kind of corrupts itself. So the old Nazi intelligence agency became the CIA, and then you've got all that paperclip business where they pulled a whole load of German scientists over.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with the Germans in charge of pretty much everything that happens in the States in the 10 years after the Second World War of any consequence. All the chemical projects and all the kind of the rocketry projects. So I don't know whether I would count any of that as being an intelligent thing to do. Would you, when you've just defeated somebody in a war, would you pull all their scientists in?
Not in your life.
Exactly. But it must have seemed like a good idea at the time. I don't know why. Maybe they just saw Russia as a bigger enemy than the Nazis.
So they said, but Russia, from the time when they kidnapped the Tsar and killed his family, but didn't really kill his family, they're not telling us the truth about what really happened in a lot of the historical situations. In fact, I sometimes lose belief in my own version of truth in reality and have to ask myself after I've said something, well, is that true, or is that just a perception, or did I say something deliberately untrue to provoke something? But it's hard to be consistent in the world where you're punished for your belief system. And so you don't really tell people what you believe until you've vetted them. Although we're telling people what we believe here on radio. And I guess it's our way of striking back at a world that isn't listening to anything we have to say otherwise. So we're preaching to the choir because nobody really has any say to be listened to. And the courts call it standing. But you see, they've made up this concept of standing that I don't grant to them. So I'm at the point where, okay, there's no real authority in the world. Therefore, I am the authority because I am sovereign. How do I approach other sovereign people and make deals with them without the interference of the system?
Yeah, I mean, I use the show as a way of kind of collecting information and expressing parts of myself that I don't normally express. I try not to have too many opinions because usually I change my mind about whatever I've said. I'm probably going to change my mind in 3 weeks anyway. So it's sometimes better not to express the opinion, but it's all experimental at the moment. So I'll just say whatever.
So you're trying to accomplish something by saying what you're saying. What is it that we're trying to accomplish?
I'm just trying to have space for a conversation, space to go in any direction.
Well, I look at it as a live action role play where you can play the role of Dennis, the open philosopher, expanding your interests to hear what people have to say, and then attempting to unite those conversations into a form that actually makes people better off than if we were stuck under the same old system forever.
Yeah, I think there's a lot you can do just with an open conversation. I mean, we don't have to agree with each other all the time. We generally agree quite a lot of the time between the two of us because for some reason we've got parallel interests, and I get what you're saying a lot of the time, even if I have to translate it a little bit.
Yeah, it's one of those things where our conversations empower each other, and so we both walk away with value every time we talk.
Yeah, I think there's added value in the fact that it's me and you. There's some added value to that, and I think with all conversations, even if even if they're kind of a bit obstructive or a bit confrontational or a bit kind of oppositional, there's value in the conversation. You've got to just learn how to extract the value from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we do. And a lot of people who are listening will, and a lot of people who are not listening right now will be able to pick this up off BitChute when you post it. I had an interesting conversation. I had an interesting conversation the other day on YouTube that I ended up taking down the video because about 40 minutes into a 45-minute conversation, a person named Faisal appeared on the screen, and I had asked people, I let people from my audience in, and Faisal appeared unresponsive when he was on screen. And then all of a sudden, his picture turned into a beheading video, and I just had to click it off and kick him out of the room. But it got me thinking, how many people actually have Middle East terrorists or things showing up on their YouTube channel at random? And I must have 100 followers on YouTube. Huge amounts, according to how they count. But in my world, 100 followers is okay. Why would a person come in and hijack a conversation video? I was talking with my friend Upcycle Club. It just didn't make sense. I think it was targeted specifically at me and trying to send a message. But what sort of message is that sending? We're going to terrorize you to get you off the air because the shadow banning didn't work for us?
Right. No, it's a strange thing to do. It's trolling to the ultimate extreme, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and once I got it off screen, before I got the guy out of the room, the stream turned to porn. So it was definitely something set there as a disruption, and I can't believe it was random. Which I've been a targeted individual since when I met you and we were doing the New Way radio show on Steampunk Radio. And somehow I think they've caught up with me again. And my usual idea on them catching up with me is to take off and take flight. But I'm not going to do that this time because the world is in a perilous moment and the diaspora of population will be happening, but there's no reason to get embedded in it, especially not now where immigration policy in all countries is so fragile because of the overload of governance in the migration of people. And so we're seeing problems all over the world that were created by our governments in order to provoke events at this time. And it seems to me that we're not complying with their resulting wishes. And so they're ramping up the heat. So I don't know. I'm not sure we make it through this winter with total sanity in this world. But what that means, I'm not sure either. Because I think there's a portion of insanity that befits us, and that trying to be sane all the time might be irrational.
Oh, being sane all the time is irrational in this particular world, I think, Lenny. There's no doubt about that. It's a bizarre combination of, it's like rational's got the rational's got the irrational built into it. So it's a yin yang thing. You get so far along, and you've got 5% irrational and 95% rational, and then it flips and goes the other way. And we're at a place now where we're just about to flip and start to go rational again, hopefully.
Like the magnetic poles flipping on the Earth?
It could be that it's got to be some kind of electromagnetic or any cosmic ray type thing. It's something coming from the sun, probably.
Mm-hmm. I think that
it may be influenced. Go ahead.
our knowledge of chemistry and physics is preventing us from seeing something obvious.
Could be. I mean, the Theosophical Society's version is cosmic rays. Also, it's the cosmic ray model, isn't it? It's 7 rays coming from the galactic center via the sun.
Okay.
And there's different combinations of the 7. So it's, what is it? Will, love, and intelligence, and then intelligence is broken down into 4 sub-rays. That's how the Theosophical version works. I can't remember the sub-rays of intelligence, but that's where rationality would live, I would think. And yeah, there's the various combinations. So if that model is reasonable, which it might be, because we're obviously being influenced by something larger than ourselves in terms of how the human race is thinking. The intelligence has got to have the reversive intelligence built into it as well, for whatever reason, because everything that can exist has to exist. Just to provide the novelty that you were talking about earlier on, you need to have that, like the reversal. That's the way that I look at it anyway.
Microscopic reversibility, in the sense that if the immediate step can suddenly be reversed and not taken, but macroscopically, I don't know. Have you ever read Power versus Force by David Hawkins?
As it happens, coincidentally, I have, yes.
I think his scale of rating people is sort of interesting. And for a long time, I believed in how he did it. Now I can use the scale and alter it a little from his preconceptions. But I thought I was stuck on 499 for a long time, and finally broke that barrier, and then shot up to 599 and sat at that barrier for a while. But I think in our aspirations, we're all going to get to 999 and never quite cross the 1,000 threshold.
Right. So yeah. Yeah, Power versus Force is interesting because it's a longer kind of version of Sedona method. Sedona method's got exactly that structure. It just doesn't have the numbering system that goes with it. I think he doused the numbering system, or he did it with muscle testing or something. So he's added that, but it's the basic structure is Sedona method in Power versus Force.
Okay.
I like Sedona method. Sedona method's a very useful way of working through life, because you can ultimately, when you get to the point where where you train yourself just to let go of the strong emotions, and it's the emotion that's coloring your perspective and your perception of how the world is. So the more you get used to letting go of those of the strong emotions, the better, really.
I imagine that when I was in Sedona, it struck me how the method of the Sedona method could come about, because the place is just so beautiful in the realm of where it is in the high desert that it makes you think and lose track of everything else. But I don't know that I'd want to live in Sedona or Ashland or any other New Age community. I I wonder about the term New Age being applied to communities to give them some sort of consideration or inconsideration. Uh, it seems like a demonstrative that if you get called New Age, you can then be loaded into a group with all these other New Agers and everybody's afraid of damn.
Yeah, it's a pejorative now, isn't it? So it's like, but everything that people call New Age that I was interested in was always 5 or 6 or 7,000 years old at least, anyway. So I don't know how you can make it. How can astrology possibly be a New Age thing when it's been around for 50,000 years?
Yeah, I think back approaching 2012, I got involved with a lot of the New Age movement and got to meet some of the people involved in creating things. And I still have friends from back at that time, but it seems to me like it was a liberal hijacking of thought that took a whole group of the intelligentsia and nullified their ability to be considered seriously. And intelligentsia these days, I don't consider seriously. The university system is part of the major league problems that we're going to have to overcome, because it's about teaching folks not what's going on, but how to function within the current paradigm. And the current paradigm died a long time ago. And it's only now that the mechanisms of that paradigm are breaking down because we don't have a belief in it. But if you're like me, a chemist, and you think about process, there has to be a mechanism to get through the process. And if the mechanism doesn't work, the process doesn't happen. But we have ways of getting around that mechanistic process now. And I wonder if they are real or just imposed. Because as we said earlier, if you think the way you do, you impose your world upon nature, and nature always reflects back what you perceive, even if it's imposed upon. It's not how it works, but it's how it reflects it back at you.
Yeah, it's really just a personal responsibility to see your own filtering system and to see your own biases and to, I don't know, I mean, I try my best to let go of biases and to look at things from multiple different points of view, but I've still got biases. I've still got a tendency to go in a particular direction, and if I don't stop myself consciously, I'll end up back in the same kind of viewpoint that I've had for years. So I have to consciously look at the opposite to make sure that I don't just fall back into my old thinking habits all the time.
Right. But then sometimes your old thinking habits served you well and shouldn't have been fallen out of because you were misled by something that was new think.
Yeah, there's an element of that as well. And then it's just a matter of trying to work out which is which.
Well, this has been a pleasant conversation. I see we're approaching the last 5 minutes of the show. And so it's one of those things that I like to stand back and cover the ground that we covered. And we were all over the place today, but I really think we're making progress to the idea that individuals control their own proper reality, and that if we don't buy into something, we can basically set it aside and it won't affect us until we address it right on through one of our biases.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking a certain amount of personal responsibility. You can only do so much, but the more responsibility you take for your own life, the more your life kind of starts to feed back and give you the responsibility. So
Yeah, in a way, it's a hyperbolic curve in mathematics where you have
Right.
an asymptote that approaches zero, and then all of a sudden you're at the other opposite end of the scale. And so it's funny, they don't teach mathematics properly anymore. Mathematics has been hijacked by those people who insist that it's perfection, whereas it's only a means of accounting and it's a language, not an end in itself.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a modeling language. It's a way. It's just a way. I don't know. I mean, algebra and maths is an interesting thing because there's a lot of power in the formula, in the construction of it.
Yeah, but geometry and sacred geometry are two different forms that happen to have the same name. And our basis of math to be linked to proof eliminates what they say is impossibility, but I think it doesn't eliminate it, it just ignores it. And that the realm of the possible is totally achievable within our own imagination and action that stems from it.
Yeah, I think the combination of feeling it physically and imagining and assuming that it's already happened is a powerful technique. We're about to come to the end of the show, Lenny. So tell people where to find you online if you're still at Minds.
Yep, the Mad Doctor Time at minds.com. And I have a YouTube channel, Dr. Lenny Time. But you can't find me because I'm buried at YouTube. They have done some interesting algorithm things. But you never know. It's always something. Thanks, Dennis. It was a pleasure being on. Tomorrow I'll go back to listening to Mona on B, but it gave me an alternative way of preaching to the choir.
Yeah, and we've got Eagle Flower following very shortly on Studio A. So there's a lot of good stories in Eagle Flower show normally. So it'll continue with the same kind of vibe. All right, thanks for being here, Lenny, and I'll catch you again next time. We'll make it a monthly thing probably.
Okay, and I'll still appear on Saturday mornings if I can get woken up in time. But
Yeah,
since
absolutely.
since I've been following Prem League soccer, I tend to get up early on Saturday morning.
All right, yeah, because it'll be 5 o'clock my time for the football. All right, take care, Lenny. See you next time.